Just warming up, got the sponsors up, and here we go.
All right, cool. Everybody excited for the last talk of HackerCon?
Woo!
Everybody tired like I am? Yeah. All right, so when zombies take to the airwaves, it's this is going to be a really fun presentation, I hope. It's got some serious kind of stuff into it. We're going to take kind of a satire view to it. But I hope you guys have some fun and enjoy it, especially as wrapping up a very successful HackerCon. A little bit about who I am. My name's Tim Fowler. I'm an IT security consultant for MountainStack LLC out of Asheville, North Carolina. You can find me on Twitter at Rubix. A little bit more about me. I'm a Christian, very proud member of WNC InfoSec and Proverb Hackers. Big Linux enthusiast, come out of a Linux development background. I love everything about Wi-Fi, and I hate everything about Wi-Fi for the same reasons that I love it, and we're going to get into a little bit of that. I'm eternally grateful for my friends and family. I wouldn't be here today without them. I always rely on your people, and I'm really excited to be able to stand here. This is the first conference that I get to do this. Back in March, I made a lifestyle change, decided to get healthy, do some lose some weight and stuff. And about 3 weeks ago, I just competed in my first USA Triathlon half Ironman competition. Crossed the finish line and stuff. So really excited about that. Thank you. It's like I said, it's I want to be able to do this for a very long time. So I figured the easiest way to do this is to take control of my health and get healthy. So real fun stuff. But why this talk? This talk is really kind of fun, but hopefully you're going to learn something. Anybody went to DerbyCon this year? Saw Johnny Long's talk, specifically on the zombie apocalypse. He was doing that for, the theme came out of Hacker Halted this year, which I was also at. So we both had this zombie theme. But one of the things that's really cool is he based his entire thing kind of off of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Is if you guys are familiar with that, it's these steps of like the basics of like food, water, shelter, all the way up until you get to the self-actualization where you're, personal fulfillment and stuff. And but what I quickly realized is that Maslow was completely wrong, and the hierarchy of needs actually looks like this now. It was Wi-Fi, now it's battery and stuff. So we're gonna exploit this. The second need here of Wi-Fi, but really we're just talking about zombies. This talk gives me the ability to talk about zombies and not look completely stupid. I'm not a zombie expert. If you guys are, anything that I say wrong up here we can discuss afterwards, and we can both be wrong because zombies don't really exist. But the premise for this talk is how can we possibly use wireless technology to save the city in a apocalyptic zombie infestation. So really kind of far-fetched scenario, but if you hang with me, we'll actually be successful, maybe. So in order to do this, we've got to paint a scenario. The first thing is every person in this room is going to be a part of this group. The backstory is 12 months ago, the city of Charleston, West Virginia, they decided that they were going to implement a citywide wireless network for convenience to all of the citizens of the city. And some of us have been managing that wireless network for the last 12 months. But all of a sudden now we're in a situation where we're got a zombie infestation that's impending. And the city has tasked us as a task force to utilize all of our resources to try to help us at least survive this. And so collectively, we're the people that are going to be using the wireless network to help our efforts in protecting our city. So we're going to be in Charleston, West Virginia. It's really convenient because we're in Charleston, West Virginia. Our status is we are in an apocalyptic situation. Our communication infrastructure is very limited, primarily cellular. The reason for this is mass hysteria and panic. If you think of 9/11, the cellular networks basically completely crashed for 400-mile radius of New York because it was just so much saturation. People are panicking and things like that. We do have utilities, so power, stuff like that's good. We do have our citywide wireless network, which we're extremely proud of. And our current threat that we're facing is zombies. Everybody with me? So this is what happens in the zombie infestation in 2014. We have a bunch of humans going about their daily lives. We're all carrying smartphones and devices and stuff. Add a little bit of zombie, and you get zombies with smartphones, which is kind of terrifying, actually. But in reality, zombies can't use smartphones. We are making the assumption that zombies have basic animal instincts of basically feeding, surviving, moving around, and that's it. So they don't really inherit a lot of the human traits. There again, if you're a zombie expert, we can discuss that later. But we can use their smartphones, which is so valuable to us, and we're going to look at that. There's 3 areas that we're going to focus on for the next few minutes of how we're going to utilize the wireless infrastructure that we have in place to be able to offer protection of our cities. And the first, it starts with information gathering. Then we're going to get into trends and forecasting. And the third, which is probably the most important, is how are we going to effectively communicate with people. So the key to information gathering is you have to be able to gather information. It's kind of implied in the phrase. But typically, we don't look at like a wireless infrastructure as a means of gathering critical data and things like that. And the reason why is because what's the network made of? We've got potentially a controller, and then we've got a bunch of access points, and they're just providing internet. Well, if we take those access points that are spread out across the city, and we stop calling them, we drop the access point, and we call them sensors. We now change the whole mode and the way we're operating, because a sensor is nothing more than a device to detect or measure a physical property, records, indicates, and otherwise responds to it. So while for the last 12 months we've been providing internet for our citizens as they walk about in the city, today we're changing the whole mode of operation. We're using every bit of data that network's providing us in each of those access points as sensors for measuring specific types of data and things. And from these sensors and the collective of the entire network, we're going to be able to do some really interesting things. So any network admins in here? All right, okay. No big deal. So what we've got up here is a couple of dashboards that are commonly seen in a lot of your wireless infrastructure. Unify by Unity. It's a really, really nice product suite. Very popular amongst municipalities and things like that because they're cost effective. These are some of their displays. You've also got this one in the lower left hand is the Cloud Tracks and Open Mesh project. But what this is the interfaces that as a network admin we're normally looking at. We're seeing IP addresses, we're seeing MAC addresses, we're seeing what access points they're connected to, signal strength, how much data transfer is taking place from all these individual devices, and we can see them in a lot of nice context. And we're looking at this data every single day as an administrator. But today we're looking at it from a slightly different perspective. This is essentially metadata for individuals. Is metadata for humans that we can utilize and look at things. So one of the easiest things to look at is like what access point are things connected to. So if I've got a device and it's connected to access point A, and then I see that it's connected to access point B, what does that automatically indicate? Movement. Something's taking place, because hopefully our access points aren't moving. But so we're actually, and just looking at these 2 data points, we can actually go, okay, we've actually seen this device moving in space within our network, and it's going to be utilizing these bits of information that we can do to formulate this kind of a plan and this process for protecting against the zombie infestation. If you're familiar with the Cisco wireless control system, This is I love this picture up here because you've got heat maps, which are showing your wireless coverage, but it's also showing your client density. How many people are connected to a single access point? Well, in an emergency situation such as the zombie apocalypse, knowing where people are located and the quantity or the density of the people there is very important. If all of our population is equally distributed across the city, well, that means we're going to handle things a certain way. But if we see huge pockets of dense population, well, that's going to pose a real big issue, specifically with the zombies, because it's a pack mentality with zombies, and so they're going to go to the highest density places, and we need to be able to see these things. And what's really nice is that if you look, let me see if I can. Is the cursor showing up? No, it's not. If you look closely, you'll see a couple of skull and crossbones. And this is the way that Cisco is indicating that you actually have rogue clients. Clients that aren't approved to be on the wireless network. They're not connected. They're just showing up in the proximity of all of these access points. So not only if we've got people that are connected to our network, but even just the people in the proximity of these access points, we can see them in real time, where they're at. And so if you take our entire infrastructure that we have and overlay it on a map of the city, you can sit here and watch the movement of your population fairly easy. Now, understand, we're not actually tracking people. We're tracking devices. And this is the whole NSA thing of we're just collecting metadata. Everything we're talking about is actually just wireless metadata that you're able to completely pull from the airwaves passively. None of this is active. So what was cool is I gave this talk in Augusta, Georgia, and Tim Tomes, Landmaster 53, who did Recon NG, he got this idea. He's like, wow, you can do a lot with this information. So he's like, I want to set up a system that will allow me to detect rogue clients on my property. And so he wrote a tool called WUDS. You can find it on Twitter. It's on Bitbucket. It's a wireless user detection system. But basically what he's doing is he's got a Raspberry Pi that is in monitor mode, and all it's doing is scanning for any device that's broadcasting a probe. And if it's broadcasts a probe, it captures that. It goes through the whitelist to see if it's a legitimate device or if it's not. If it's not an approved MAC address, it sends a text message notification to him. He actually thought it was broken at one point in time, and but it was actually, as soon as he got the alerts, the doorbell rang, and it was UPS. Before somebody actually came on his property, he actually knew this information, and all we're doing is capturing packets out of the airwaves and parsing them to provide us this information. And so here we're kind of using this as like a protection mechanism, but we can still implement the same thing on the citywide level of where we're capturing every single probe request that every single device is sending out. And by being able to catalog that and database that, we can look at history over time. This is a cool map here that's we'll get into a little bit more detail, but this is the result of a project called Creepy Doll. This was done in Wisconsin by a gentleman named Brendan O'Connor, and each of these dots here indicates essentially a wireless client. Now, in this case, the sensor that he was using was mobile. It was strapped to a bicycle. But this is a great snapshot of exactly what I'm talking about, where you can see these population densities. You can see it's like, all right, obviously this here is going to be a big problem. We're going to have a lot of people here. If panic ensues here, it's going to be chaos. Down here, not so much. Which is going to, as we get into the forecasting and the trending, we're going to be able to make decisions based off of all of this data. And here again, this is passive. We're just instead of just broadcasting internet now, all we're doing is actually just listening to all the airwaves. Brendan Connor wrote this project called Creepy Doll. It's a distributed wireless sensor network. It was at Black Cat in 2013. Got a lot of press. It is pretty creepy, just in the amount of information that we can find. Down here, if you look where you see all the devices, those are all Raspberry Pi based sensors. That whole setup costs about $500. And the amount of area that you can cover from a wireless perspective with those 10 sensors is actually kind of astonishing. But yeah, so we've got these systems out there that have been developed to capture this information and stuff. If you look at the top right, you can see that he was able to figure out that it's iOS 6, an iPad, using LogMeIn, and all these data sets. And this is, here again, understand, all of this is just going over the airwaves. It's completely passive reconnaissance in this case, or it's really not reconnaissance. It's really, we're talking about passive wireless surveillance. So this is one of my favorite projects. The Snoopy Drone was 2012 Black Hat by a company called SensePost. And what they did is they created this program called application called Snoopy that would allow you to do have these sensors that they call drones, and you could distribute them across the internet or however you wanted to. In this case, they literally attached it to a drone and flew it around Black Hat in Las Vegas. And it's capturing all this information. And then you can pull all that information into Maltego and do transforms upon it and actually see all of this information in real time. Well, they came out with a new version called Snoopy NG, or it's Snoopy 2.0, that does a lot of more distributed capabilities. It does GPS, XB, Bluetooth, GSM, bunch of stuff. So, right, we're specifically talking about 802.11, but the capabilities out there to do a wide spectrum type of, here again, passive surveillance. Does anybody know how difficult it is to detect passive wireless surveillance? Has anybody ever done it? Because I don't know of a way. All you're doing is listening. That's all you're doing, and it's completely legal, almost on any spectrum technically, because as long as you're not transmitting, nobody can do anything, and they're not going to find you. So we've got all this data. We've got MAC addresses, which are unique identifiers for devices. We've got the access points that they're connected to. We've looked at the change in access point connections over time. We've looked, if they're connected to the network, we have data usage. Data usage is going to be a really important thing because it's going to give us a baseline for what that device averages do. But not only that, we have all the historical evidence. Remember, we've been running for 12 months. We have 1 year of historical data because I failed to mention we've been logging every bit of this since day one. And the reason why we've been logging is we've actually been preparing for the moment that's getting ready to come. Is we have all this data. Now what are we going to do with it? And this is where trend and forecasting comes in. Any meteorologist fans in here? I've got a good friend who's getting into meteorology, and it's really interesting. Does anybody know how we predict weather, hurricanes, stuff like that? It's real simple. It's predictive analysis based off of historical events. We take all this data set that we have, weather conditions, temperature, barometric pressure, jet stream positions, all this other stuff, and we funnel it into these algorithms. And outspits, yep, the potential for a hurricane in the next 7 days is this. We're forecasting stuff. Well, guess what? We can do the exact same thing with all of our wireless data. If I've got a device that 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, enters the city network on this street, takes a right turn, goes 4 more blocks, takes a left turn, and parks for 8 to 9 hours, comes back and reverses that process and leaves. Every day, 5 days a week for the last year. Okay? That's very valuable information to me because in the zombie infestation, what's going to happen is we're going to see a deviation from those courses. The baseline that we've collected all up until this point is all of a sudden going to change. Based off of where those changes are occurring, we're going to be able to do proper predictions and forecasting. So up here, we've got a couple examples of migratory bird patterns. And the way these things were generated is they literally put trackers on birds and watch where they go. Well, in this case, we're not putting trackers on people. They're paying for the trackers, and we're just utilizing them. And so we're able to look at this history over time. Well, all of a sudden, if you see a species of birds, all of a sudden go to Australia, that it goes outside of this norm that has been established over time, that's most likely indicative of an environmental change. Something has happened to cause this disruption in the normal migration patterns. Well, in the zombie infestation, we're going to see the exact same thing happen with people and devices. Because what's going to happen? People are going to run. And they're going to run really, really fast. And they're going to run away from things. And they're going to run in the same direction as everybody else is going. And these things we're going to actually be able to see happening through our network. We're all safe because we're in the convention center or the civic center. We're all going to survive, but our other people probably won't, unless we make these right decisions. The graphic on the right there this is just another example actually coming out of Canada into South America. But these are migratory bird patterns. And this is how we formulate this information. So what we're doing is we're taking the same concepts that we're going to use for migration, and we're just going to stick it on our wireless data. MAC addresses, signal strength, data usage, access point location, and connectivity. Yeah, I'm actually missing a slide there, but anyway. So let me go back. Okay, yeah, let's go. So these things here. We've got temperature over here. Well, we're not measuring temperature on our sensor network. We're actually measuring population density. The more clients, the darker it's going to get. We can see this through a heat map. The right side of the United States. Anybody know what that's a map of? In 3 presentations, nobody's guessed it. Earthquake likelihood. Obviously, you get into the Midwest where there's some big faults. There's a lot of current. Look at California. It's red. They have like a bajillion earthquakes a day, it seems like, out there. But all this information is history over time, and that's all we're looking at. Is we're going, while we have a snapshot of what's happening today and in this moment on our wireless network or within the airwaves, we can rely on all the historical data and the statistics of that to figure out where things are likely to go wrong or where they're going wrong. So we now have all this wireless data. We have the ability to decipher that data, look at what's happening. We're able to see people running. We happen to see essentially the mass hysteria that's taking place from the comfort of our civic center, looking at our screens. And from that, we can make decisions. We can figure out where the safest places to be are. We can figure out which direction the zombie horde is moving, because I make the assumption, for the most part, that there's kind of a pack mentality, because it's very efficient style of hunting. And so we're going to be able to see these movements. We're going to be able to see the areas of the city that are not affected. And it's like, hey, if these people can go here, they're going to have a much more safety. Let's say, I don't know if Charleston has an armory around, but maybe we can get to an armory or some secured facility to try to funnel people into. We can make that decision based off of all the data that we have, but we've got to be able to effectively communicate that information to them. And so this is where communication comes in. This is really the most important thing to our survival as a city, because having the information, we've gathered the information, we've now performed our analysis of it, we've got our statistical outputs, our predictive analysis of what's going to happen over the next 4, 5, 8 hours to a couple of days, and now we need to be able to communicate this effectively. So there again, wireless is going to be one of the answers that we're going to utilize for this. You guys should know what this is. This is a ham radio station. Anybody here a ham radio operator? You guys are my best friends. And in any emergency situation, the ham radio operators, they're going to be our best friends. Whether it's natural disaster, terrorist attack, heaven forbid, or the zombie infestation. Being able to get reliable long-range communication in place, it's those guys that are going to be able to do this. And they do it on a daily basis. And so if you're ever worried about the end of time, just become best friends with a ham radio operator. Because they tend to, my experience is they're a little bit more paranoid about certain things, and they take other precautions that normal people don't. Very, very good. I've got one ham radio operator friend who has like an EMP cabinet and all this stuff with extra radios and stuff. Like, he's fully prepared. I think he's paranoid until it happens, and then we're best friends again. But yeah, so ham radio is going to be a very, very important form of communication to get in masses. At this point, I'm not so much concerned about FCC regulations of what you can broadcast on stuff, because we just need to be able to communicate with our people and stuff. And so this is going to give us a means to it, but specifically we're looking at 802.11. And I'm jealous because they get to play with really cool antennas, and I'm pretty limited in what I get to do legally. But what's really nice about ham radio, especially as a technician, if you have a technician's license, is that you get to operate in the 802 or the 2.4 gigahertz spectrums on channels 1 through 6. Well, if you know your 802.11, that there's an overlap of that, which is very, very important. Which that means that they have the ability to communicate within our data channel specifically, but they have a huge advantage that we don't have as normal people, and it's because of the way the FCC set up this. And I'm just going to read the last line here. The maximum allowable output is 1,500 watts. Okay, ham technicians can broadcast up to 1,500 watts of 802.11 between channels 1 and 6. It does have to be unencrypted, but still, okay. To do a compare, yeah, up to 1,500 watts. That is a tremendous amount of power, because if you compare it to what we can do, we all love our alpha adapters. Legally in the United States, especially if you use the long antenna, you have to basically leave the transmit power at about 27, which is about a half a watt. Okay, if you want to go to Belize, you know, through changing some things in your setting in your computer, you can actually use the maximum of 1 watt on the old school alpha adapters. So we're talking a 1,500 to 1 output ratio. Very, very, very powerful means of communication. Because not only can they do all of the verbal communication over, you know, all of the many bands that they have access to, but we're also going to be able to do long-range data transmissions and things like that for being able to, if we've got troops on the ground, sorry guys, everybody on the left side of my left, I'm going to have to actually put you guys out into the field for a little bit, running, you know, scenarios. Hopefully you'll make it. Sorry, it just happens, but being able to communicate back with us and things like that when you don't have a reliable infrastructure for, like, you know, picking up a cell phone and calling and reporting in data, statistics, things like that. Ham radio is going to give us the ability to do that. Utilizing your cell phone and stuff, you could actually connect to a 1,500 watt AP all day long, and you're talking about reaching out and touch somebody. Not to mention, if you got a 1,500 watt receiver, and when you're talking about listening to things, you can hear way too much doing that. So another thing that I came up, so I'm a hardware geek. I like hardware and things like that, and so I was introduced to Lisk architecture a long time ago. Which, if you're not familiar with that, it's basically reduced instruction set computing, and like ARM processors and stuff, they've got a lot just reduced instruction sets compared to like our x86 and things like that. So I actually came up with a new form of something. It's called Lisk, which is actually limited instruction set communications. And so what this is basically a system that allows us to produce short bursts of data and short bursts of instruction sets that we can put over to the airwaves that most anybody can receive. And how do we do that? Let me see if I can flip over and actually get this running. Wait a second. All right. Yeah. So if you're familiar with one of my favorite toolkits called MDK3, it actually gives us the ability to do what's called a beacon flood. And so if you look in your wireless settings for all your devices right now, what you're going to start seeing is SSIDs that look like these over here that are actually instruction sets. What I've done is taken a file with instructions, and I'm broadcasting it over the airwaves. And this is really cool in my opinion, because while all of us do not leave our wireless turned on all the time, and we definitely do the automatically connect to open networks, how many of your families does? Your mom, your dad, things like that. The mass majority of the population leave these things turned on by default, which means that if this is the case, what's going to happen is these instruction sets that are in the airwaves right now, they're actually going to pop up on their device. So I've basically just injected instructions into their device from the Civic Center, yay us, yay wireless. And these are going to be really important because we can do this on the access point level. So if we're trying to wrangle people into specific directions, once they figure out, hey, I can see this information, then they're going to be able to, as they traverse the maze of our network, they're going to actually be able to see new updating instructions and things like that, and hopefully we're going to be able to get them to safety. And so these are just some of the things that that we can kind of implement to protect against the zombie infestation. But it's a cycle that once we do our information gathering, and then we do our trend forecasting, we do our communications, we have to repeat the entire process again because we need to see if our communications were effective. If we tell everybody to go to this one location and nobody makes it there, we probably haven't done a good job of communicating, which means our forecasting, our trends analysis and stuff was probably off. We need to go back and revamp it and keep gathering the information. It's like if we all of a sudden issue over ham radio, over Lisk, or any of these other methodologies that we could communicate effectively to the masses, if we all of a sudden we issue these communications and we see all of these devices acting in according to our communication, then we have a level of understanding that we're being successful in our efforts. But as they migrate and move through the airwaves of our network, we're going to then have to start the whole process again because now they're in a new location. We're looking at things. One of the things that somebody posed to me is this is all well and good in the first 8 hours until cell phone batteries die. If you're on an Apple, it's probably like 4 hours. And it was interesting that they said that. But here again, we have historical data that if you go, how many of you are going to go home tonight and not charge your cell phone? Okay, one. Okay. Well, in our scenario, tomorrow we show up, we look at our data sets, and all of a sudden we see a bunch of devices that are no longer on the network. What can we imply from that? Most likely they've fallen to the zombie infestation, because zombies aren't going to charge their cell phones. I hope. That's going to be completely disprove my theory here if they do. What? What'd you say? The zombies are going to start a Twitter feed? Oh, God. Well, yeah. So we actually, I'm glad you said modern day zombies because we actually do have modern day zombies. I don't believe in zombies of like flesh eating, people and whatever stuff like that. But the fact of the matter is, everything that we've kind of talked about, and it's a really far-fetched scenario. I understand how crazy this talk actually is. But at the meat of it, we have reality. So we're leaving our scenario and we're going into reality. And welcome to the modern day zombies. We all know these. I should have actually taken a pictures at DerbyCon because some of you guys would have been on here. because I just watched, and everybody was walking around talking like this for 4 days, and it was really, really interesting to see. But so what we have here is these just average people, everyday consumers that are carrying these devices that are transmitting all of this information. They're completely blind to the fact that they've basically paid for their own tracking system and things like that. And so, and from this standpoint, I call them data zombies. All they're doing is consuming data. That's their whole objective. They're going to stay updated on their Twitter timeline. They're going to update their statuses on Facebook. They're going to be Instagramming and whatever else the kids do today and stuff like that. That's what their whole objective is consume data as fast as possible without understanding what the repercussions of that is. So our fictional scenario is really not as far-fetched as it seems, because what we're actually talking about is wireless surveillance. In our case, we're talking about mass wireless surveillance, not targeted. We're covering an entire city with a wireless network. The amount of information that you get, you know, this is, I don't like to say this, but this is like Big Brother stuff. You know, to be able to see, because all we're doing is collecting metadata. That's it. Nothing's identifying the people or anything like that. But let's be honest, we can identify them really easily. Data mining. The data that we're collecting is so invaluable to organizations, to companies, to governments. Does anybody know how we typically monitor traffic congestion on roads? It is so new school technology, it's not even funny. We put 2 water-filled cables on the road and let people run over them, and we count how many cars go by. That's how we test for traffic density. Imagine being able to look in real time at the actual congestion on your streets and it's just data. It's all it is. It's just data. And so the data mining, the big data brokers and stuff, they want this kind of data because one, they're doing trend forecasting. They're looking at what people are doing, how they're doing it, where they're doing it at, and they're making decisions based off of this. And I've got a really good friend, Michael James, who pointed me to this company in one of his blog posts. It's Ecommerce Analytics. This company is selling exactly what we're talking about here. They're basically selling an analytics platform to retail companies and things like that for the purposes of, well, let's look. First, Euclid shows up how your customers shop. Senses how your smartphones flow through space and how long they stay and how often they return. That sounds exactly like what I've just proposed in the zombie apocalypse. Okay? They're looking at traffic patterns. They're looking at density. They're looking at how often you come. They're building a pattern. They may find out that you only shop at this one store on Saturdays. Well, guess when your coupons are going to start hitting your email box? Probably on Wednesday, because they're like, hey, we can get this person in the store. We can start doing targeted advertisements, targeted communications with this person because we've got that. And I understand we're talking about metadata here, but it is really easy to cross-reference a device at the cash register at the time of transaction. Smartphones send out short pings as they search for Wi-Fi networks nearby. These pings include the phone's MAC addresses, signal strength, and non-personal identifiable information. Wireless probes, all this stuff. This is the information that we're gathering as a collective group on our network. This is exactly what they're just putting into words for us. This is my favorite thing in the whole thing. This is how they sell it to the customers. Is that you can see when people pass by your location, how often they come, if they walk in. Do they engage and buy, or do they just spend time in the store and don't do anything? Is it first time versus repeat? How fast do they leave? Where do they go in the store? Okay, from a retail's perspective, this data is huge, because if you've got an area in your store that's not being trafficked, you can make changes. You can reset up your store. You can put more enticing merchandise in that area of the store. Things you can change the way your entire store flows simply by this data, and the purpose of that is to increase sales and your conversion rates. So, I mean, if you've got people that are passing by your location at a 1,000-to-1 clip, well, that may not be good for a retail. So you make these changes, and it's just data. This is cool. So this was a Boston Marathon in 2010. I don't know which company actually generated this, but this is a wireless device heat map. This was at the finish line of the Boston Marathon, and that's all of the wireless devices in the area. Okay, some company thought it'd be really fun to do this, and I think it's awesome that they actually did this. But this is a real-world scenario of exactly what we're talking. If we have a real-time or near real-time visualization of this data, what we can do with it is so amazing in terms of our trends and forecasting and actually making things happen and protecting our citizens, protecting our city. And here again, the meat of this thing is, while the zombie infestation is completely a thought up thing, fantasy thing in my head, the reality is that not only is this being done, but this can be done really, really easily, and it can be really done cost effectively. But more importantly than that, it is almost impossible to detect. So there's no stopping any of us from going out and building our own sensor network. It's completely legal because we're not transmitting. We're just listening. Now, would some legal ramifications come about if somebody stumbled across your massive citywide network? Yeah, probably at that point, and I don't want to be that guy, so I need one of you guys to take the fall before I do. Nothing personal, guys. But yeah, this is a reality, and so the next step. A lot of this is kind of theoretical. I know it's completely practical and stuff, but the next iteration of this kind of concept is the actual building out of the network, being able to generate and produce this type of sensor network for rapid deployment. Things that you could do in an emergency situation or anything else. Like, honestly, I could sell this to road companies that all they do is patch roads and stuff like that, just for being able to look at traffic patterns and stuff like that. Because if you don't believe me, go get one of these tools, get a Raspberry Pi or something like that, put it in the trunk of your car, and drive up the interstate. You will have more information than you care to deal with. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up, and we are... questions and comments, concerns, or bickerings? Yes. They're free because they're packets. Are you talking about like an actual sensor? Okay, yeah. So it depends. You can use your regular access point as a sensor. All you have to do is log into your home router, look at all the devices, look at the MAC address, look at the data stuff. But traditionally, you want to build specialized sensors. Typically, you can do these for between about $50 and $100 per sensor, especially if you're using like a Raspberry Pi. I'm actually working on a new project right now that's going to reduce that cost down to about $35 per node. It's going to give you some really, really strong capabilities, and I'm hoping that I can we'll be able to come back maybe next year and actually do that. That presentation will be at many places next year, starting off at B-Sides Huntsville in February. But yeah, you can use your laptop. Like if you got, as long as you've got a card that will support monitor mode, you don't even have to support packet injection. If so if you got an Intel card, like one of the new ones, guess what? You're ready to go. Go sit at the coffee shop, get a copy of, I would recommend Snoopy NG, and get that set up and just start running it and just listening to all the information and looking at it. Open up Maltego, look at all the transformations, because it's amazing. I mean, you can find usernames, logins, and stuff from just these passive scans and things like that. You can get really, really, but we're not wanting to even go that far. I'm just wanting to look at the general data and the ability to track people, to look at changes over time through a virtual landscape. But yeah, you can do it for really about 50 or so bucks. You basically just need a Linux-based system and an interface that can support monitor mode, and then everything else after that is how you want to scale it up, implement it, and things like that. So, any other questions? And unfortunately, our efforts were not successful, and we all died. So thank you guys, and I hope you have enjoyed. I will post the slides later tonight. You can find them on Twitter at Rubik's. I have all the links and references and stuff like that if you want to get in and look at some of the research that other people have done, kind of get a idea of what's possible and what's being done out there. And it's a good place to get started as far as the information and stuff. And so, yeah, happy hunting.